Oprah Winfrey once said, "Be thankful for what you have, and you'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never, ever have enough." When we go through major changes in life or at work, the natural reaction tends to be threat scanning and self-preservation. Today, I'm inviting change management consultant John Cerqueira to bring a new perspective on change to our listeners, one that focuses on gratitude, service, and abundance. Together, let's convert the resistance that often comes with change into fuel for personal and professional growth. This is E3. Engage and empower with empathy. Welcome to the show today, John. It's so nice to have you here. I was super excited for this conversation because it's been at least 3 or 4 months since I saw you speak, and I met you for the first time at an event. And I was so inspired by not just your personal story, which we'll get into, but your really unique approach to the way you lead people through change. And honestly, I kept thinking to myself, if only I'd known this guy a year ago when I had to lead an organization through change, there would have been so many great insights I could have brought to the table. But anyway, everything happens for a reason. Better late than never. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, that's so kind of you. I'm so glad we met. And hey, probably would have made the last year more fun if we knew each other earlier. But hey, we can only do what we can do. So here we are.
That's right. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your personal story, which I find incredibly amazing. And of course, today's topic is all around gratitude. And for those of you based outside the US, today is Thanksgiving Day in the United States. And I know I, every year during this holiday, really take time to reflect on what I'm thankful for. It's probably one of my favorite holidays for that reason, because it really just reminds me how much we should be focusing on gratitude more than just once a year at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
But since we're in the moment and we're being thankful this week, let's talk a little bit about how gratitude became part of your life very early on in your young career when you survived the horrifying events of 9/11. I still can't believe. It's just amazing to me. So could you share your story with the listeners and just explain how this traumatic event changed your perspective on life?
Yeah. Thank you. Um, yeah. So this story starts May of 2001. I graduated from NC State University here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and had always wanted to live in New York. And so I moved up to New York in June and got a job with my office being on the 81st floor of Tower One of the World Trade Center. And so uh, on September 11th at 8:46 in the morning, that's when the first plane hit our building about 10 floors from where I sat, and it kicked off about an hour-long journey down the stairs to get out of the building. My boss and I escaped the building about 5 minutes before our building collapsed and fled. And we were caught in all the debris and made our way to the boundaries that were now being defined as ground zero, starting at Canal Street, where we were given medical aid from first responders and we were being asked questions from reporters. And we didn't want to talk much about the event and we didn't really want to be in the area much longer, but we did ask them to help us with something. On the way down the building from the 81st floor, my boss and I happened upon an office full of people on the 68th floor. And one of the coworkers in that office was a wheelchair user. And it was a woman, and we offered to help her, and she allowed us to. And so we picked her up and used an emergency wheelchair to get all of us out of the building. And when we exited the building on the West Side Highway entrance, we put this person in an ambulance. And then when we separated and the building collapsed, we didn't know if the ambulance had gotten away. So we asked the reporters if they could help find someone that met this description. We did not yet know her name. In all the chaos, we just didn't exchange pleasantries. But we asked them if they could search hospitals or wherever the ambulances were going to go to see if this person made it out okay. Instead of doing that immediately, they took our story and put it in the national newspaper in USA Today the following morning. And that kicked off this really interesting experience where we were doing a lot of interviews on outlets like Good Morning America and in People Magazine. We were on Oprah, participated in a handful of documentaries, all really focused on this theme, our capabilities that emerge as human beings when we're serving others and the fulfillment that comes from serving others. And so that was a message that was really pronounced and really well articulated from professional copywriters, and it rang true. Meanwhile, I was really just living in a state of confusion and really almost disbelief that this whole thing could happen, and was just so grateful to have made it out alive and to have been able to see my family and my friends again. There was a simultaneous lesson of the power that comes in terms of fulfillment when we're serving others, married with this profound feeling of gratitude.
That's incredible. You were what, 21, 22
It's
when it happened?
22. Yeah.
I think about how I was at that age. I mean, you're a very young adult, still learning, still growing, still trying to get a handle on the world. You just moved out of your home state to a huge city, a huge metropolitan area. How did your perspective on life change when you graduated and moved versus after that event happened? I mean, that must have transformed you in some way.
It did. The most immediate change was in my priorities and my goals. Like a lot of people who move to a big city, there was this motive of being on this fast track of a career and being in the center of where big things are happening, and that was my driving force. And on that morning, my priorities and my needs, my desires really shifted to not a pursuit of professional success, but the pursuit of time spent with people that I cared about, doing things that I cared about. And so that period for me was characterized by a lot of interviews and speaking engagements, really telling a story with a lesson around service that was meant to be inspirational and also calming to the general population who was still reeling with what all of this means. Unfortunately, that guidepost or those guidelines of how my priorities would be organized didn't last long. And after a short period, I went back to following the framework that a lot of us are given in our professional lives, particularly drivers, strivers, high performers with ambition. And so it was short-lived, it was very profound, but I wasn't really sure how to make that part of my life on an ongoing basis, following what now I see was a very narrow defined path of professional pursuits and success.
And I'm sure
Yeah.
this led you at some point to the path of helping people, guiding people through change. I mean, I can only imagine the change evolution you were going through as a young person, having
Yeah.
survived that event. And I actually just a few weeks ago interviewed a woman by the name of Denise Mueller. She's a senior
Mm.
executive at a biotech company. And she was talking about how the biotech industry has gone through some major changes recently, and a lot of companies have been doing restructuring, layoffs.
Yeah.
And so she's really taken it to heart to lead people through change with empathy and
Mm.
compassion. So really that has been front and center for you. And your approach to change management and leading people through change is very interesting. And I find it intriguing. I think it complements what Denise was saying very nicely. And you
Yes.
talk about gratitude, service, and abundance. So tell us a little bit about those three pillars and why they're important for leading change initiatives.
Yeah, for sure. What I think is probably helpful is to make the connection between my experience then in 2001 and following this path that was not completely consistent with the lesson that I was taught and that I was sharing in speaking engagements. I would do speaking on the value of service, mostly to nonprofit organizations and first responders organizations. But then I just went back to work and followed the plan that a lot of us are given of, get a job, hit your marks, get a promotion, make more money. Ultimately went to graduate school, got my MBA, got another job, uh, more money, more metrics, and it led to what I thought was a really big job for me at the time. I moved back to Raleigh, and this job was outside of Raleigh. I had to commute to that spot every week, and was reporting directly to the CEO, who had already been wildly successful, and the startup was very well funded. And I started just doing the things that I thought a young executive would need to do, and behaving in that way, which was not particularly service oriented at the time. It was very metric driven, very objective driven, performance driven. And ultimately, that pace was just untenable for my work-life balance and my family. I was physically gone all the time, but then when I was here, I wasn't really engaged. I wasn't really here. And so, after a really profound experience where I realized it was a choice between my family and this professional life that I thought I was destined for, I chose my family, and I gave back the role, and I crashed because it was difficult to give up the promises of wealth and recognition. But also I crashed because I realized that I had been given this gift of this really valuable lesson back in 9/11 that was handcrafted by professional copywriters and people who said, hey, this is what really a message is that is resonant with the masses. And even with that experience, I wasn't able to make it part of my daily practice, and it wasn't what guided the way I made decisions. And so uh, I resolved to figure out, how do we keep ourselves oriented towards this universal truth that we know to be true, that we are most fulfilled and most connected when we're serving others. But how do we keep that as a practice when the world is driving us to be separate? The world is driving us to be performance driven and to compete. And so I was doing that work just on my own, looking at um, experts in the fields of positive psychology and emotional intelligence, but then some ancient traditions, spiritual traditions that were all pointing to this very universal truth, and from different perspectives. One was very kind of open-ended and ethereal, and the others from positive psychology and emotional intelligence tended to be a lot more tactical and practical. And I said, okay, well, this starts to work. And then during the pandemic, this was October of the first year of lockdown. I've spent the majority of my career with a sales training and management coaching organization. I was doing business development and running some of their projects. And the key tenet of this organization was teaching people ethical influence, how to suppress ego, and to really have a heightened sensitivity of what the people that you're interacting with are saying and want and need, and what serves the moment.
Mm.
And we applied that in various business contexts in sales organizations. Well, in October of the first year of lockdown of the pandemic, two separate clients of mine, both in the pharmaceutical industry, one located in the Northeast, the other in Canada, where it was getting dark, it was getting cold, lockdown was particularly pronounced. They reached out and said, hey, we love the sales training that your company provides, but we don't need sales training right now. We need help getting our people out of bed.
Hmm.
And we think that you have something to share about navigating change and driving towards resilience, based on this experience that from Google we know you've been through in 2001, and we see you work with our executives to our front lines, speak to crowds of hundreds of people for big company kickoffs, and we think that you could be valuable in this context. And so I worked with these groups really with the use case of helping them navigate this unfamiliarity, this cataclysmic change that we were all feeling. And they got something out of it. And I was shocked because I didn't think I was qualified to do this. And so I did that work, and I used a lot of the skills that I had learned through facilitation and alignment meetings and needs analysis. And it worked. And so I said, well, gosh, this seems fun. I want to do more of this. And then the pandemic started, we got out of lockdown, and I was like, well, what is the use case for this? What does this mean? And I called back my old clients and said, would this be valuable anywhere else at any other time versus the pandemic? And they said, well, yeah. Effectively, what you were doing was helping us to adapt to a change and helping people develop and practice different behaviors that allow them to be flexible and adaptable. And we're going through change all the time. To your previous guests' reference to reorganizations and layoffs and acquisitions, that became the use case. And what I found is those experiences in organizations drive the same types of feelings of fear and disconnection and the inability to think clearly and the unwillingness to collaborate by putting up protective patterns. And it's the same antidote to these various different flavors and shapes that change in general can take. And so I started working with these groups and started organizing these universal principles that were highly simplistic, but so open-ended and so true to what's going on in human nature that I put it in a model that would be easy to understand and make it repeatable and put exercises behind it. And that's what I started doing. And so that model is, when we're faced with change, the same survival instincts that keep our physical manifestation intact, right? Self-preservation, competition, reproduction. When we're facing change, those instincts go into overdrive. And the same instincts that serve us in keeping us alive, actually, in too great of a dose, prevent us from really thriving. And the root of all of these survival instincts is keeping you safe in an otherwise hostile environment, keeping you separate. And essentially, it's all fear. And when we're behaving in a way where our survival instincts are driving us, we're not thinking clearly. In fact, physiologically, your emotions, including your fear response, physiologically, when you get sensory input through all the different senses we have, hits the base of your brain and impacts your limbic system. The base of your brain here is before you can get to your frontal cortex, where your executive function lives. And so, from a very physiological perspective, your senses, the input you're getting, hits the survival instincts physically before you can start thinking clearly. And so I thought, okay, if whenever you say some version of "we're most fulfilled when you serve, do what's right for the greater good," very few people argue with you. They say that is right. They agree with you. But then when you ask the next question of, well, the last time you were faced with change or something happened that made you scared, did you operate in a way where you served others? They said, no, of course not. Well, why? If we know that's the best way to be most powerful, most capable, why? And it's fear. And so I started first with, how do you tamp down fear? What is the best way? And that's where gratitude came in. And that came in because, we were vacationing with another family, and one of the children was throwing a temper tantrum. And the mother asked if that child could name 3 things that they're grateful for. And the kid stopped crying, answered, and then was able to make the good choices that you tell a child to make good choices. And I said, what is this hippie nonsense? What did you just do? And she said, well, we met with this child psychologist that taught through our school. And she said that when a child is throwing a temper tantrum, it's their way of expressing that their needs aren't being met and they're scared. And that tantrum is the best they can do with the communication resources that they have at that young age. And so gratitude is a way to tamp down this seeing red, this inability to access your executive function and make good choices. And so you've got to tamp that down first. then you can get to making good choices. And that's where light bulbs went off. And I said, gosh, I wonder if that works with adults. And surely it did. In our, my sales training companies, ethical communication training, particularly for customer service, we would talk about this instance in which customers call and they're angry, and the customer service rep wants to just give the answer. And even though the answer is right and the best way to solve this person's problem, the customer doesn't want to hear it because they just want to be heard. They are throwing an adult temper tantrum. And so you've got to diffuse that emotional state to then be able to make way for a logical, practical conversation. So I said, okay, great. Gratitude is the first step. If we want to get to service and operate in a way where we're scanning for what is needed at any particular moment, it's an exercise of being present, operating with a sense of heightened sensitivity, to see what's needed and where you have a unique gift that could be of value in that time. The only way you can operate with that level of openness is if you're no longer in that moment scared. And so if you're operating from a sense of gratitude, you start building this feeling of capability, of security, and ultimately servant worthiness. Like, hey, I can help someone else without anything bad happening to me because I recognize now all the things that I can point to that represent my safety and security. And so built the model of gratitude, service, and then once we do through service the next right thing that's most harmonious, most sustainable, which is most oftentimes what's of benefit to the greater good, then we might make that step or do that one thing, but then life comes back to us and you start calculating, well, what if that doesn't work, or what if I don't get repaid, or what's the next thing that's going to happen? And again, our survival instincts, our mind has evolved to help us predict all the things that can go wrong to keep us physically safe. And so as we look in the future, we are much more likely, we are programmed to calculate all the different ways that harm can come to us. And that gets rooted in the scarcity mindset. You start assuming the bad things because that's all that's being presented to you. And so the antidote to a scarcity mindset is an abundance mindset. Instead of assuming that things are going to go against you, let's start assuming, or let's at least start putting a vision for a scenario in the future that's going to be positive. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be what we want or what we need or just what's right. When you're feeling change or the fear of change, the discomfort of change, operating with a model of gratitude, service, and abundance is appropriate and helpful from a self-regulation approach. Right? If we put ourselves back into the scenario of the pandemic where we're being asked to adjust our lives in ways that are so uncomfortable and so different than what we've been conditioned to expect, from a self-regulation approach, gratitude, service, and abundance becomes a model that can be helpful to make sense of sometimes the senseless or at least the unpredictable. In an organization going through change, this same exercise can be helpful for the individuals going through change, but also adapted to a coaching model. What all of this is, gratitude, service, and abundance, is if service is the thing we want people to do or we want ourselves to do, this is really, from a consulting perspective, a prepare, deploy, sustain model. Right? Prepare yourself to deploy service with gratitude. Then deploy the act of service of assessing what's needed and meeting the moment. And then sustain the power that comes and the fulfillment that comes with being of service, with the abundance mindset for the future state that you're going to move into as soon as you're done doing the last right thing. And so turn that into a coaching model where oftentimes the active service and the assessment, I'll use the GROW model, right? Very well accepted coaching model across every, type of and flavor of coaching methodology. It's essentially goals, reality, options, what now? And so that gets fit in the service piece when you're coaching, but it's still sandwiched between these fear mitigation elements of gratitude and abundance. And so we use gratitude, service, and abundance in a coaching approach for someone leading others through change. But then even as I work with, say, key executives, C-level executives, or CEO, CHRO, who's communicating to an organization, that they're asking to change. I help those people in those roles craft their message in a way that aligns with this gratitude, service, and abundance model. And so you're communicating to a group of people who have a way of operating with which they've grown comfortable. Now you're asking them to do something different. Let's open that up with a sense of gratitude, both expressing the executive's gratitude for the contribution of the people they're asking to change, but also highlighting all the things for which that audience should be grateful for, right? What are the wins that we've had? What's the progress we've had? How have we served our customers? How have we made a difference? And so getting them to capture a sense of psychological safety so that they can actually hear the message of what are we doing, what's going on, and why. And laying that message on a foundation of service. Hey, we're doing what's in the best interest of the greater good. Your greater good, the company's greater good, who serves our customers in a very specific way. And so if that's what our goal is, here's how we're being asked to adjust, and here's what we're asking of you. And then moving from the ask, the call to action, to the idea that, even if they agree in the moment, when you leave that audience, either you're speaking to them or you have written communication, and that communication pathway closes, they go about in their world and they're going to calculate all the ways that this new state of being or new way of the world could go wrong, because that's what we're wired to do. And so we've got to leave them with a message of abundance, which is this combination of confidence in the future. Let's paint a picture of what this life looks like once we get through this change, once we adapt in a way that makes the most sense, but also this element of non-attachment to the future. Just this idea that, hey, no one can predict the future. And so it's just as likely to go well as it is to go poorly. Why don't we just orient on it's likely to go well? And if it doesn't, we'll iterate then.
I love that, and hearing you take me through that journey that you take people leaders and executives through in companies. It's no surprise that you are also running for office. So we're actually recording this episode before the elections. So when the
Yeah,
episode comes out the week of Thanksgiving, we will know the outcome. So John's running for city council in Raleigh, where
that's right.
we both live. So tell me a little bit about how you're taking what you've learned in the corporate world and applying that to change and evolution in your own community.
Yeah. Um, I did not see this coming, by the way. That arose because I started doing a lot of work with companies locally, and that introduced me to different nonprofit organizations. And so I was doing a speaking engagement with a nonprofit, Activate Good, on their day of service, where really I was thanking the volunteers for their service and highlighting the value that comes with serving. And some people at the city said, "Oh, wait, what does he do for a living?" Change management. And he speaks to people and he speaks on the merits of service and benevolence. That feels like someone who could be a valuable, productive public servant. And so I was asked to run. And the more I looked at what was going on in the city, which I'd always followed to some degree, um, you know, I now see the city as a big change management exercise, right? Raleigh continues to be on the top 5, top 10 lists of best places to live. Our population is growing by leaps and bounds. Wake County, where Raleigh's located, um, is growing by about 50 people a day. So 50 people a day on average move to Wake County. That's an apartment building worth of people, I don't know,
It's
every week and a
incredible.
half. And so we've got to adjust, right? We've got to first figure out, where does everybody go? How do we accommodate the demand for housing, meeting it with the necessary supply? And that means that there's some discomfort. Things that used to not be at a place will now be at a place. And therefore, people who are used to not seeing something in one place are now going to have to get used to seeing something new somewhere, or things that used to be there adjusted and refined. And that's uncomfortable. There's people coming, and we have to put them somewhere, and that just means that oftentimes we're going to have to adjust, and no one loves adjusting, particularly when they haven't chosen the circumstances that are driving them to adjust. And so, same way in professional organization, there's a fear, there's a discomfort, there's a feeling of something's being taken away from me, that the exercise of gratitude could be of benefit to, right? No, the type of work I do with organizations going through change, a lot of it is getting people to get to a point where they can think clearly and can operate with a sense of collaboration and drop their protective patterns and work across the aisle of people who are thinking differently than you are. Oftentimes in organizations, it's different cross-functional teams, different layers in the organization, right? Executives want everybody to operate a certain way, and the people being asked to change feel like they're being, pressed on. And that's a lot of the feeling that I hear from citizens when, the city, any government entity makes a decision, and they say, well, how dare you make that decision and force me to do this thing? And the people on council and the people that operate within different facets of the city and different different levels of government. You see them getting in their own corners, and the theory is that same capabilities that I use to help organizations navigate through change and get on the same side of the table and really start thinking about problem solving in a collaborative way could be of value in the city of 500,000 people with a roughly $1.5 billion budget.
I appreciate you making that parallel because there's so many bits of what you practice as a consultant that will apply so beautifully in that type of community service work.
Running for office, which I've never done, is a huge learning exercise. It's wildly unfamiliar and it trends on being uncomfortable. But in this state, in running for office, while I'm doing my work with my clients, I'm forced to take my own medicine and not anchor too much to any particular outcome, but just to operate with this idea of, center with gratitude. Hey, win or lose, there are so many parts of my life that are blessings, and whether I'm in office or not, those will persist. And then the active service is just assessing, okay, in this set of circumstances, what's the next right thing to do? And how can I operate with a sense of presence and awareness so that I have this kind of openness to scan and assess what's needed so that I can meet the moment. And that's all I can do. And then from the abundance piece is, yeah, I have confidence in the future. I have a vision for what it will look like and where I can be of value if elected. But there's also this non attachment of saying, guess what? If that's not what's going to happen, or if it is, that's the plan. And we'll figure out one way or the other. There's going to be another recalibration, another assessment of what's the next right thing to do. And if I'm working that skill and that's how I'm operating as my model, then whatever comes, I'll just apply that model to that. And it's sure to work, at least in the long term, even if it's beyond my physical manifestation and it's longer than the time that I'm physically on this earth, it will work out.
I love that advice on just detaching from the outcome. I mean, the fact that you're able to say, regardless of the outcome of this election, I will still be able to serve people, go out and make an impact. And that's the thing. It's like it doesn't matter if you have the title or not, you will still be supporting the community by
Sure. I mean,
doing what you do already.
well, the very practical example of that is another thread that led to running for office is some friends of mine and I spun up a skate park on land that has been designed for a city park called Smoky Hollow Park, and the park was going to take, when we started this endeavor, about 5 to 7 years to complete. And we asked the city if we could put something there, and they said sure. And so we got a $0 lease from the city and raised private funds and put some skate features on what's an otherwise blighted part of our downtown, and turned up. It evolved. It got a lot of energy. People use it of all ages, all backgrounds, and it's just been this beautiful piece to my life, my family's life, and I did that without being in office. So those are the types of things that I'd love to continue doing.
I love that. Keep doing that. And as we wrap up our conversation and we go back to the gratitude piece and being thankful during this special week in the United States, what would be your top three tips for people maybe not even knowing where to start with gratitude, service, and abundance? Are there three habits people can adopt right away, even today?
Yeah. So the reason I chose those terms is purposely because they're so broad, they're so open ended. I wanted to make sure that what I was selecting didn't, force people into some proprietary library of exercises that they had to pay for or like access in some cumbersome way. And so, first step is go seek out what practices work for you. Gratitude can be fostered by meditation, by journaling, by active activities like taking a gratitude walk, walking through your neighborhood, walking through the woods, and just using that time to reflect on gratitude. And so those are three different exercises that could be helpful there. And there are, infinite number of exercises for that, for service, for abundance mindset. But, really to make any idea that you want to be part of your life a habit, you need to schedule it. You need to prioritize it. So first stage is schedule your time to invest in these activities and building these mindsets and making your operating model consistent with them. And so first is scheduling it, which could just be scheduling how you're going to make it part of your practice and what exercises work for you. Or scheduling can mean I'm prioritizing time to do the practices that I've already decided I'll do. The next is curate a group. A lot has been spoken about mastermind groups, employee resource groups. Our Surgeon General came out a few years ago and said we have a loneliness epidemic and we have a connection crisis. And so curating a group helps to kind of foster this tribe of people who are all interested in getting better at these specific dimensions of life, and it in and of itself represents a group with which you can practice and express gratitude, where you can brainstorm on ways to serve, where you can share stories of and methods of fostering an abundance mindset and operating with a sense of confidence and non-attachment. And so groups are my favorite way to do this. Then the last piece is keep your eyes open. Keeping your eyes open for signs and references to these virtues being present in popular culture, in art, in visual art, in music, in film, in literature, in what people say when they're public speaking. Right? If you have your lens up for, oh, these are universal truths that are applicable in so many scenarios in life, you'll find yourself watching something or reading something and say, oh, I'm taking that as a nugget. It was really just a pursuit of indulging in different media and different learnings and different traditions that all lead to this small group of simple concepts. If you've got your awareness up, you'll see different references and different clues that are all around us.
I think that's wonderful, and it reminds me a lot of something that happened to me a couple of months ago. I was interviewing for a role that I really wanted.
Mm.
And I heard back from the hiring manager unexpectedly hadn't been chosen as the candidate. And so to your
Mm.
point about detaching from the outcome, I did not do that. I was attached to
Mm.
the outcome, right? I was
Yeah.
expecting this role and I was feeling really upset, kind of sorry for myself. And one morning I went out for my morning run and I was hypersensitive to my surroundings. I was just really feeling deeply in tune with my environment, given my vulnerable state. And I just happened to look over the bridge as I was running over the bridge, and someone on the other side of the bridge, on the concrete of the dam, had formed "I love you" with rocks. It was huge. And I
Yeah.
actually stopped and started crying and then took a picture. And I think that is just one example of if we're really in tune with our universe and we're looking for signs, the world will speak back to you. So, but you have to be aware enough to really tune into it and learn because the universe teaches us things every day. So thank you for leaving us with that really heartfelt piece of advice because I think it really means a lot and connecting through a group. I mean, this whole podcast is building a community. I often think how wonderful it would be to have you and like three other guests come together, because I think you would love each other. I mean, there are so many inspiring people who I'm building as a community virtually that keeps me going every day. It inspires me knowing that there's
Yeah.
this community out there, that leaders who all want to take care of other people at work. Thank you for your time and for being a part of this podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is designed to help busy business leaders create an inspired and engaged workforce. I am building a community of like-minded leaders and experts who all share the same passion, taking care of people at work. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. If you know someone who I should interview or should be part of this community, please connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.